Hi there, Section 24. Here I am again on Wednesday, November 2nd, All Souls Day, an All Souls Day edition of our class. And I'm going to offer you again a kind of a condensed version of what I did today. And I hope you're all well. With my so-called, quote-unquote, mild hearing loss that I've been diagnosed with in the last couple of years, I don't know what you can hear, but through my lavalier mic, but as you know what's going on. Our houses are just being buffeted by this tremendous wind that blew today. And I hope no fires got started in Minnesota, because there's no stopping one on a day like today with the state kinder dry with all the leaves off the trees. You know, I began class today with a poem, and I'll put that poem by Ted Kooser at the end of this video, because it's about 5 minutes long. Let's just make it optional. If you're in the mood for a poem, great. And if not, well, you can just turn me off, can't you? Can't do that in a live situation, but give it a chance, give it a moment. I love that man. I got things a little bit out of sync, and that's fine. I think the principal thing that I want to do today is give you a quick report on what we talked about today regarding the old man and the sea. Also, I had a little card. I like 3x5 cards. Quizzes are kind of hard to offer. They feel, pop quizzes can feel punitive, but I try to concentrate on the idea that they also reward people who did the assignment, and I don't think it was onerous to ask college students to read The Old Man and the Sea as one of our Lost Generation writers. So we'll see how they do on those quizzes. I can see the first person up on deck, Brandon Manicky, aced it. He wrote a nice, beautiful paragraph explaining how the end of that story goes. Quick report on that, and then I want to tell you three things about William Faulkner. And if you started reading that, you probably got a little bit frustrated. Faulkner is a lot more difficult than Hemingway. I told my students today, I even drew it on the board, Professor Freytag's famous diagram, right, with the rising action and then the tailing off. I believe in that model. It accounts for a lot of the ways plots actually work. But I also think of it as the way a semester should work. I think there should be a slow start, kind of rising action, and some kind of pinnacle of difficulty or challenge. And you don't want that to happen just before Christmas. You want it to happen right about now, month of November. And that's why you're reading William Faulkner, and then we'll have a little tailing off as we move towards F. Scott Fitzgerald and Thornton Wilder that are a lot easier. Toughest reading I'm going to offer you this entire semester is now, and let's give you some help with that. First, though, I want to share some thinking that I did today in my classroom, because I had to show them something pretty scary that I came across this week. And let me just editorialize. At Central Lakes College, every teacher, we all get to be who we are. In fact, everybody at CLC gets to be who we are. And the majority of the teachers at Central Lakes College, I would say, are non-religious. Professors tend to be agnostic atheists. Well, I'm not. I'm a man of faith. And I talk about it once in a while. And I think how I began class today was just by letting students know that, and maybe I've said something like this to you. It's getting hard to remember exactly who I've said, what I've said, where, for what purpose. But I have now for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half at this point. I've been really trying to wonder are we living in regular history, or is there something larger going on? And I'm in the latter camp. I think something epic and definitive is happening to us. I kind of think it's the apocalypse. That doesn't mean I'm down in the dumps, because the word apocalypse means revealing and unveiling. And but you could say, like, one stance could be, well, we've always had war, we've always had pandemics, bad stuff's happening all the time. This seems different to me. We've had a very terrible pandemic, killed all kinds of people. My colleague, Adam Marcotte, has been surviving it recently. Everybody in the department got it except me. And I'm the crusty dinosaur who didn't get the vaccines. How's that? I'll probably be barking like a seal next week. Then war, right? We're all scratching our head about what Vladimir Putin's going to do to all of us. Is he going to be part of history? Is he going to end it? Hitting that proverbial button. We've got economic collapse, chaos everywhere, riots in every country over the price of food, price of energy, and it's looking I think it's looking a little bit rough. I don't think this is a regular stretch of history. And just to start preparing you for a really dramatic and disturbing image that I've got to show you in a minute, just kind of brace yourself. Let's read from, let me give you a little bit of a reading. It's not exactly poetry. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus's dudes, they're all like, okay, when is this all going to happen, man? And Jesus takes a break, and instead of speaking in the usual confusing parables, he gets real clear, and he says this: there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up, lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. So, okay, sun, moon, and stars. I actually sang to my students today from that old John Lennon's song, Shine On. Maybe you've heard it. I think he penned it after he left the Beatles. He certainly did. Well, we all shine on like the moon and the stars and the sun, right? You know how that goes, or at least a few of my students did. Sometimes English majors burst into song. What was he thinking of? Was he thinking of that gospel passage? He wasn't a particularly religious person. But, you know, just to get celestial for a minute, but not astrological, because I don't put any stock in astrology. Last week, NASA took a film of the brightest explosion, the most intense explosion that they've ever seen. And I know NASA's only been around for a few decades, but apparently this was a star that just went supernova in a big way. And it's a good thing we were light years away, because we would have been incinerated. So that's, you know, a star thing. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the country's got its undies in a bundle because we have the midterm elections on Tuesday. I put my stock in poets, not politics, and we're supposed to be super neutral about that. And I'm not a political person in that way. But on Tuesday, while the elections are going on, this has never happened. A supermoon is going to happen. Our last blood moon of the year. And we've been having elections for 2.5 centuries, and during the election on Tuesday, there's going to be a complete and a total eclipse of the moon, which kind of freaks me out. Is that coincidence? Is that something to worry about? I have no idea. We've arrived at the moment where I'm actually going to prove to you that this is the apocalypse, happening right now, in real time before our eyes, in this period of time that we're living through. I've talked about the stars. I made a mention about the mention of the moon. Look at this. This is a photograph that NASA took just a few days ago of the sun. Behold. Okay? No, what's going on here? This is the sun. Is this a Teletubby? No, I don't think so. What I think this is a straightforward evocation of the most disturbing monster ever dreamed into being by Hollywood. And you know who it is. It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Look at this. If this isn't proof to you that this is the end of the world, I can't provide anything more. Well, I think this is proof that we are in trouble. I'll be serious now. My students had a few things to say about the old man in the sea. I was really impressed in particular by one student, Maya Rose Severson, who has no idea that I'm talking about her on the internet. Right away, she dialed in that there's some religious undertones in this novel, even though Hemingway swore up and down that he never intended any religious imagery or any religious themes in all of his literature. He was an atheist. All these writers were, and that's fine. I'm clapping for everybody. But what I loved, and once I got her going, Maya really wanted to think about it. We have the ocean, right, and the old man in the sea. And water is never water in literature. It's always more. It's always the subconscious. Whether it's the ocean in The Old Man in the Sea or the Odyssey, or a river like in Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, or Huckleberry Finn, my favorite book. I keep bringing it up, don't I? So she noticed that, he's a fisherman like the apostles. He's praying all the time. He prays Hail Marys. She loves how he's always talking to himself. And if you go up that road, Hemingway just couldn't help it. The story's too big. Is that a literal cut on his hands, with the fish line, or the stigmata? And she didn't notice this, but she was happy when I pointed it out. One of the last great images of the novel is when this fisherman that I love so much, Santiago, is going up the beach, and he's carrying the mast of his little fishing boat on his shoulder, which of course is in the shape of a cross. got no other point on The Old Man and the Sea other than that. I just think it's a great story by a great writer, and I think it's about as pure as American literature ever gets. Now let's get technical for a second and talk about sentences. I told my students today the same thing I'm telling you. The real writing teachers in this room are these writers, these great prose stylists, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Hemingway. And since it is a writing class, once in a while, we have got to try to lift up the hood, so to speak, and really think about how sentences work, how to read them, and how to write them. And I want to tell you right now some technical things, and it might get a little bit dry, but I love thinking in this way once in a while, even though I'm a literature person. I'm not a grammarian, but I like to admire great sentences. I like to look at a sentence once in a while and go, holy crap, look at that. How did that writer do that? A couple ways of thinking about this. You could say that we have two types of sentences in English, one coordinate and one subordinate. Most college students can control coordination. Very few can control subordination. So an example of a coordinate sentence, which is a real true fact, is, I'm glad that the CLC cafeteria now has a salad bar, and I'm going to go eat a salad at 1 o'clock. That is the example, the crap example I used today. So that and indicates coordination. Two ideas more or less on a par with each other, level to each other. And is a conjunction, right? That's coordinating. The coordinating conjunctions are, what are they? And, but, or, nor, for, if, so, yet. Meanwhile, subordination, where you try to get one idea subordinate to another, that's trickier. That's a high wire act for some writers. You'll pick it up eventually, and it's no big deal if you can't do it now. You probably already can. Maybe you can. An example of the same sentence in a subordinate manner would be, I'm very happy that we have a salad bar at Central Lakes College in the cafeteria now, although I miss sometimes Chef John's mahi-mahi tacos. So that although put one idea sort of beneath another. Far more interesting to me is thinking about the idea that we have also two types of sentences in English that we could call periodic or cumulative. A periodic sentence is relatively brief. It does its work, there's a period, and it stops. A cumulative sentence that I'm going to demonstrate in a minute, because this is going to get a little bit abstract, is a sentence that kind of goes on and on. I have to be very careful and communicate to you today that writing long sentences is not the idea. That don't think, well, I got to write big long sentences like the one he's going to show me, to mimic or model it, to make him happy, to make the teacher happy, which is what we spend too much time doing in American schools. I also need to be very careful to let you know that Faulkner could write periodic sentences, and Hemingway could write cumulative sentences. And again, I got to demo it. I go fondly back in my memory to a long ago student named Gita Albaraz. Gita Albaraz, who went off and took an advanced degree in creative writing. When Gita was 16 years old, and I'm looking through the forest here at my old school, I can almost see it if I squint. When she was 16 years old, she said, I'm not reading William Faulkner. This sucks. I'm like, what's the matter with you? What is the matter with you? Well, she proclaimed in front of God and everybody, most notably her sophomore English class long ago, American Lit, that Hemingway's too easy. She says a chimp can write this prose. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so we had this little 2-day, 3-day running argument about this. And one day she jumped up in class and brought Perkins and Perkins' American tradition in literature, American literature and tradition. And she had it queued up to a Hemingway story, Big Two-Hearted River, which stars Nick Adams. And she says, okay, we're going to play a game. I'm going to hold the book, and you cover your eyes and put your finger down on the page, and then read the sentence that your finger lands on. I'm like, oh, Gita, I don't want to do this. Don't do this to Ernest Hemingway. She said, do it. I'm like, okay. So I closed my eyes, bang. My finger landed on a sentence that read, there was a good smell. That's a periodic sentence. I was getting grumpy at her, and she said, do it again. I'm like, okay. Close my eyes, put the finger down, the index finger lands on the sentence that runs, Nick was tired. I said, you're wrecking Ernest Hemingway. It all unravels if you do this. He should be read as a whole. It's about clarity, it's about simplicity, it's about the plain style. Please don't do this. Well, she ran off and got an advanced degree. Now let me show you this. Hang on, I gotta click on this. Here's a William Faulkner sentence that demonstrates that is accumulative. It accumulates, or it is cumulative in meaning. And this is from his story, The Bear. The dogs were there first, 10 of them, huddled back under the kitchen. Himself and Sam squatting to peer back into the obscurity where they crouched. Quiet, the eyes rolling and luminous, vanishing, and no sound, only that effluvium which the boy could not place yet, of something more than dog, stronger than dog, and not just animal, just beast even. One student threw their hand up and said, "What's effluvium? Excuse me?" I said, effluvium means a funky smell. So Hemingway would have said a bad or funky smell, and Faulkner's going to use the word effluvium. Hemingway's going to use the word everywhere. Faulkner's going to use the word ubiquitous. So I said to my students, "What do you think of this sentence today?" And they were kind of Gavin Justin kind of did a wobbly thumb thing. And no one was really excited about this sentence. And as I've heard before, they accused William Faulkner of a run-on, right? Well, this isn't a run-on. This is a grammatical sentence that holds together. This is a classic Faulkner sentence. It doesn't just have one or two clusters. It goes on and on and on. And if you take the cursor, as I did many years ago, and put it at the end of each piece of punctuation, remember, for me, a cluster is any, I don't care about clauses or phrases. I think in terms of clusters and how they modify the free-flowing modifiers tell you what's happening to whatever the subject is of the sentence. This ain't complicated. This is just a boy under a porch with a bunch of stinky dogs. But let's take that cursor, hit it, and take a look at this. This is the sentence almost turned into poetry, and you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 clusters. And I think this is a masterpiece. Again, I got to emphasize this. I'm not saying you have to write like this. I love short sentences. I love medium sentences. I love beautiful long sentences like this. But Billy Faulkner tended to stretch things out a little bit. A couple takeaways. I asked my students today, how many of you have ever been on a small lake? Well, all the hands went in the air. It's Brainerd. And I said, how many of you have ever fished for walleye out on, Mille Lacs or Leech or Red Lake? Again, most of the hands went in the air, and very quickly they realized that Faulkner is reaching for longer frequencies, right? Little lakes like mine, my 27-acre beloved mini lake, there's little waves on it, except today there's whitecaps on it, which astonishes me. When you get out on Mille Lacs Lake, those waves are longer, right? There's a swell to it. And it's just, Faulkner just absolutely going for it. A little bit of advice too, because I can see some of you can write, even though I've just started in on reading your writing. I observe often in young writers, like it's usually like an 18-year-old woman, because they tend to read more. Dudes, I'm sorry. They read more when they're young. We'll go into that on another day. An 18-year-old woman will discover suddenly that she can pile meaning onto meaning. And what can happen is this. I'll look at a sentence, and these clusters are starting to get long, right? As Shakespeare would say, their endings do forget their beginnings. And here's one of the more important ideas I'm going to give you this entire fall. The trick of good writing is to keep the clusters short and relatively balanced. And that ain't easy. That is not easy at all. So we got the Faulkner sentence. I can go fast here because the second item is not complicated. When you pick up Barn Burning, and maybe you already did pick it up, you realize you're reading a story about an itinerant farmer who leads his family with no possessions from place to place to place, looking for work, following the crops. And this dude is a little bit of a maniac, because the father, the husband, because anytime anybody wrongs him, he avenges himself by burning down the barn of whoever angered him. And he's got a little boy named Sartorus who he makes help him. And they go from barn to barn, torching him, and Sartorus carries the kerosene. Sartorus has to decide betwixt two things, as the line goes in Huckleberry Finn. I guess I can't stop talking about that novel. His question is simple. Am I going to keep helping my dad commit crimes and destroy property? Or am I going to do the right thing? And I'm not going to tell you what decision he makes. It doesn't come till near the end. When you open up that story, you're going to be in a sporting goods store. For a sporting goods store in the South, think like, a holiday store or College Square or wherever you get your gas, and then pile in some guns and fish and tackle and camping equipment. And you've got a sporting goods store from the South in the 20s and the 30s. So the boy is in this store, and there's an informal trial going on of his father. And there's a judge in there. And you can smell the cheese and everything that's in the store, and Faulkner's really vivid with detail. But the first thought that the boy has, Sartorus, is, I think it's enemy. Big deal here. You got to get this, and you won't be frustrated once you understand it. There was a huge, a big-time literary technique that swept the planet in the early part of the 20th century. It was figured out by James Joyce. It's simply called stream of consciousness, and it's okay if you've never heard of it. It was an attempt by writers to replicate what's going on up here on the paper. Faulkner was pretty darn good at it. Hemingway tried it, Fitzgerald didn't touch it. But William Faulkner really mastered this technique. So the main thing you need to know, it's not that complicated. Anytime you see Faulkner lock italics, you are going into someone's consciousness, into someone's heart and soul. And that's when he stops punctuating. That's when he stops obeying conventions of writing like capitalization, etc. And he's trying to get the thought of a person, of a human being, down on paper. And sometimes his stream of consciousness can get super confusing, like in The Bear, where two cousins are fighting with one another. The problem is they both have the same name, Isaac McCaslin. Isaac McCaslin fighting with Isaac McCaslin. And you sometimes don't know which Ike is which. You've got to kind of surrender to the prose. No big deal. When you see italics, something different is going on, stream of consciousness. Last thing for today, I'm past 20 minutes. I'll try to never go past 25. The N-word occurs in William Faulkner. And I think I'll cover this a little bit more with my next video with you because I don't want to go too long. But my department right now is having a very robust conversation about the brand new climate that we are teaching in, where students have trigger warnings, where students need to suddenly run to safe spaces. And I get that. I do understand that. I don't want to shake my fist at that or make fun of that. I wrote I'm looking up at the name of a very precious student of mine. I wrote 3 or 4 letters for my friend Joe Plutz's scholarship out of our CLC Foundation. I wrote a letter last night for a very precious student to me that suffered trauma in her family, courtesy of a family member, and she and I met about that a lot last year. She's got some savage mementos in her heart. I'm not going to tell you what happened to her, but if I put a story before her in a classroom in which that happens to a character, I can see her having a strong emotional response to that. And we'll talk more about the word later. The N-word has an endless history. It's a pejorative, it's a vicious slur, and in Huckleberry Finn it occurs 242 times. In Faulkner, it's everywhere. Here's the thing though. When Twain used it, it was satire. That novel is satire. That's a book against racism. Faulkner uses it too, and it's not sufficient to just go, whoa, that's how we wrote and spoke back then. Faulkner knew that was impolite. He knew it was uncouth to use the N-word that you're going to see in his literature. But the probably most important thing I can tell you is, yeah, Faulkner grew up in the racist South. We are well south of the Mason-Dixon line. At least he mended his ways. As he lived his life, as he created his books, he went from being a racist Southerner in Oxford, Mississippi, to being one of this country's champions of civil rights. He changed his mind completely and realized that he was on the wrong path. So I want you to know that. And here comes your optional Ted Kooser poem. Bless you. I'll see you with one more vid probably Friday after I teach those classes. Enjoy what's left of this weather.